This is a Film Stories original podcast. We made this.
Welcome to the X-Cast. The truth is in here. I'm your host, Sarah Blair, and today I'm hanging out with my good buddies, returning guests, Cortlan Waters Bartley and JJ Lendl. Hey, everybody. Hey, Cortlan.
Hey, Sarah and JJ.
Hey, JJ.
Hello. I'm here.
We've got the artists on today, which is very exciting.
Yes.
I know, right?
Perfect for a non-visual medium like a podcast.
I was like, and this is all audio, so.
And we've got exclusive art to debut, which we'll be describing in detail.
Right? You can't see, but JJ and I are frantically making art as we talk.
That's right. And it's the best stuff we've ever made.
It is.
It will never be seen by the public.
Exclusive audio version of our artwork.
We will be burning it after this podcast recording.
Oh my.
Okay, this is going to be a fun episode. Hanging out with you guys is always a blast. So, today we're talking about... JJ, what is the episode we're talking about today?
Oh, you're going to try to make me pronounce it.
Mm-hmm.
Empanada?
It's not souffle flambe. I know that.
I believe that it is named after the Greek philosopher Empedocles.
Correct.
Yes.
Ding, 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 ding.
That was incredibly impressive.
I did have to look at the word as I pronounced it, just so everyone knows.
We're here to talk about Empedocles. And it originally aired on April 22nd, 2001. So, April. This is an Aries episode.
Wow.
Well, April 22nd, wouldn't that be Taurus?
Probably. I don't know.
I only know that because my birthday's April 20th, and I'm on the cusp.
Is your birthday really in April, too? Because now all of our birthdays are in April.
Really?
Yes.
Amazing.
We're all April babies.
That's hilarious. This is already going on a lot of tangents.
Uh-huh.
Episode's going to be 3 hours long.
It is. Oh, you're right. It's April 20th. Taurus. So you are a Taurus then. Okay. Excellent. Okay.
Good. We've got that down. We know what JJ considers his sign.
We are learning a lot of things already. Yeah. Learning a lot of things.
This is the 17th episode of season 8. So we're almost through season 8. It's been a minute. We're going to talk about... JJ, I want to get your thoughts on the whole of season 8.
I think that it was fun for the show to take a new path. And I am a big fan of John Doggett as a character. I think it's great that Gillian Anderson gets to add yet another layer to Scully in this season, as the character is going through a transition. So yeah, I would say generally very positive thoughts about season 8, and I think it's interesting to see the show really lean into the mythology this season, more so than it ever has before. And to see the mythology sort of go through somewhat of a quantum leap in terms of how much information it is, the show is willing to give the audience, and how much the plot kind of thickens in this season.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And Cortlan, we just talked about Dead Alive, and so we're going to talk about that with you. So... listeners,
fine.
Go back and listen to Dead Alive if you haven't listened to it yet, because Cortlan and I are going to go in depth. This was written by Greg Walker, who also did Sherkill and Brand X, and the episode was directed by Barry K. Thomas, who did 31 episodes of The X-Files, and he also worked on Castle. So, great director, great writer. This episode is about evil. what are we going to say this episode is about? Like, the influence of pure evil. Yeah. There's some fire stuff going on, like some weird face stuff happening.
Wow.
I think...
Succinct.
Yeah. I think you got it there, yeah.
I think that
Evil.
about sums up. There's pizza in it. So
That's true, yeah.
we're going to talk about that.
I think that it certainly tries to talk about the nature of evil and where evil comes from a more supernatural standpoint, but then also kind of what allows evil to overtake a person from, I think, more of a philosophical standpoint.
Right. What makes us vulnerable to evil?
It's a very interesting concept that I'm excited to talk about. Do you want to just jump into like the scores? Can you guys guess what IMDb score this episode gets?
I would guess it's probably like upper middle spectrum, like maybe around a 6 or a 7.
Cortlan?
I was going to go a little higher, like a 7.5 or an 8.
Close. So this episode gets a 7.4 out of 2,215 votes at the time of this recording.
Okay.
So it kind of falls sort of on the lower end of the spectrum of season 8, but ish. I mean, it's higher than Bad Law and Salvage and Sure Kill, but not a whole lot. There's a lot of 7s.
Sure.
I don't think there's any 9s in season 8.
No. I have either of you ever voted, for on IMDb for anything? Like,
No.
I have not.
I'm just curious who's voting for this. If it's all diehard X-Files fans, or if it's like Amazon reviews where sometimes you'll click on a review and it'll be like, I never bought this item. 1 star. It's like, how did you
star.
get here?
Not verified.
Right? I don't know. Who does vote on IMDb? Where do they come from?
So I guess if we wanted to figure out what a good metric is for like what that 7.4 means, we'd have to look to see what the lowest rated episode is and kind of grade it on a curve, right?
It's a tie. Salvage and Sure Kill. They both have a 7.0.
So the lowest they go is 7.0, and this is a 7.4. So in my mind, that is kind of a low score compared
that's
to the
pretty
rest of the canon.
Not good. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the highest score in season 8 is an 8.9, which is Existence.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me.
Because really a 7.9 would be the middle then, right? If we go from a 7 to an 8.9.
Okay.
All right. What would you guys rate this? Cortland, what is your rating for this
Am
episode?
I going out of 10 or am I going from 7 to 9? Like IMDb?
on a scale from 7 to 9 to the 10th percentile. What?
Out of 10? Oh boy.
We're grading on a bell curve here.
Sure. Well, out of 10, I think that I would probably objectively have to go 6.5, maybe 7. Just with the caveat that I do actually really like this episode.
All right.
My score, you know what? I'm going to say a 5. I'm going to be less charitable to this episode. Because I think there's a lot of good stuff in this episode, but I don't know that it really comes together very well. It almost feels like an episode that is trying to be a lot of things at once, and then I think ends up really not being much of anything in the end that it's trying to be. And I think that might be less about the story and more about when this episode falls in the show, because there's just so many other things going on than the plot of this particular episode. And when you've got only 45 minutes to tell a story, I think it's tough to tell the kind of cohesive story that I really expect from the X-Files, without it being weighed down by all that other junk. If that makes sense.
So that's like critical thinking. Like, does it change if I say like watchability?
You're always talking
do you
about
have
this
a different
watchability stuff.
score?
And I'm always like, I don't care if something's watchable. I want it to be, mathematically good.
Okay.
I get no pleasure from anything.
That's fair.
No, but I think actually, I think I really fall somewhere in the middle of these two perspectives here that we're seeing. Because I love watching this episode, but I agree that it does fall pretty significantly short if you are looking purely from like a critical standpoint, the plot and the, how it comes together at the end.
Right.
I think that's all very fair. And I'm sure we'll talk about it when we get to the mailbag, but I actually think that Andrew made like a perfectly encapsulated statement about that in the mailbag.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Well, I look forward to hearing that.
Yeah.
No, well,
Yeah.
I mean, not to be flippant about watchability, but I enjoy watching every episode of the X-Files because I like being in that world. And
Sure.
yes, I think this episode has good watchability, but after the episode was over, I didn't really find myself, thinking about it too much, I guess is what I would say. And for me, that's more of the benchmark that I'm looking for like a great episode.
I agree with both of you guys. I would say probably 6 for me too, because I like some of the concepts and some of the things that are going on in the episode. I definitely enjoyed seeing Reyes a lot. I enjoyed the Mulder Scully banter. That's always fun for me, So I know other people don't totally enjoy that, but that's okay. That's why we have, the X-Files, and we can all enjoy different things about different parts of the show, which is fun. As far as like watchability goes, I don't know. Like, honestly, some of the dead kid stuff really bothered me. I didn't enjoy watching that. I don't know if it's one that I would go back and rewatch very often, but I think there's definitely some good parts to it. So should we dive in and discuss Empedocles?
Shall we dive into the volcano as the episode's namesake once
Should
did?
we go up in flames? Up in flames.
Up in flames. Let's get this flaming train on the tracks.
Choo choo.
Let's talk about the teaser. It starts off with guy getting fired, Jeb, right?
Get it? Fired.
Oh. I see what's happening.
Symbolism in this episode is
Jeb Dukes, played by Jay Underwood, which I read Paige's article, and she said that his first acting role was in Desert Bloom with
Annabeth
Cortlan.
Gish. Awesome.
Oh.
Excellent connection.
Did they only had one brief scene together in this, though, huh?
Yeah,
One
I
or
think
two.
that's true.
I mean, spoiler alert, she shoots him. So
What if people are listening that haven't seen the episode?
What if they're listening to the episode in increments as they watch the episode? We just ruined it.
You know who else this actor played, which is pretty ironic? Do any of you guys know about the Roger Corman Fantastic Four film? Okay.
I did hear about this, though. I do
yeah.
recall this connection, but I have not seen it myself.
Very short tangent here. So in the early 90s, the Fantastic Four, the rights to the films were purchased, and part of the rights remaining with the studio, they had to create a movie. But they weren't really ready to make the movie. So they went to Roger Corman, who's known for doing very, very low-budget films, and said, hey, could you help us put a film together? And, some reports suggest that the film was never really seriously meant for release. Some people dispute that. But this film never ended up seeing the light of day. And they shot it over 3 weeks and only spent $1 million on it. Well, he played the Human Torch in Fantastic Four. The fire connection.
A low budget version
Yes.
of the Human Torch.
Right, yes.
So, yeah, that is really funny.
Just thought that was ironic.
yeah, his character, Jeb Dukes, gets fired from his job, and he goes outside, and there's a car chase and a car wreck, and the car catches on fire, which is kind of like intense. I mean, like literally, and I've never seen a wreck and a fire like that, but I can imagine like seeing somebody inside a car on fire would be pretty terrifying.
Yeah. It was a big explosion. It was like, was this guy running from the cops because he had robbed the fireworks factory? And then they all just exploded.
There was something in that car for sure. I did think to myself as I was watching it, like, how much of this episode's budget went into like this part of the teaser.
Clearly they used it all in setting the car on fire because they did not use it with the CGI with the face.
Well, and the stuntman who is then walking fully on fire, out of the car. I was like, I feel like all of this had to have taken some budget.
Yeah.
That maybe we needed later.
Well, and it's an impactful scene too. Like, I think
it is. Yeah,
pretty
very
cool.
powerful.
It is very scary. I felt scared watching it. It's like a vision. He's seeing this. It's not really a man.
Right. And as this vision is taking place in the episode, the crowd that he's a part of sort of disappears around him, and it's just him on the street as this flaming figure is walking slowly toward him, and then eventually is absorbed into him in a really freaky kind of way.
Yeah. I thought that was like maybe some of the best imagery that we got.
Yeah.
Of the like evil like passing into his like person.
And then he goes in and kills the people who just fired him.
Yeah, I wasn't clear if it was the same day or not, because it looks like he's got a change of clothes, and obviously I doubt that he had, a gun ready to go.
It is unclear.
And I think that's kind of one of the things about this episode is that it sort of implies a lot. Like you have to there's some blanks you have to fill in along the way, just watching it.
The other thing that I was thinking, like watching this opening part, especially the end where we see Jeb like going back to work with this gun, like Jeb is not subtle about what's about to happen. I feel like I was watching it like from my modern, like eyes. I was thinking, every single person that he walked by in the workplace, I feel like would have maybe felt some red flags, but maybe not. I don't know. And this was a while ago, so now in my workplace anyway, we have all kinds of training and like about what to do if you feel like someone is walking in with a gun, like But I don't know.
I felt the same way.
Interesting. Yeah, I was like, I don't know about this. Like, how does everyone not know? Like, he's got this look on his face. Like, I don't.
And I watched it with my wife, and we were sitting there, and as soon as he enters the floor, she's like, "What are they doing?" Like as soon as this guy, and he's wearing his casual black clothes, and he's got these dead eyes. Wasn't that the guy that got fired yesterday? Oh, I'm gonna keep shelving these papers here.
Totally normal. This is totally normal occurrence. Like, I don't know. I mean, we don't know very much about Jeb before he's infected with evil, so I don't know, but...
Well, he's listening to that rock music. We know that much.
Yes. That he got at Kmart. It's just, I don't know. We don't know that much about him, but I just feel like, boy, nobody noticed anything off about what was happening. But yeah, I don't think that they are very clear about how much time has passed. I think it's like the next day, I would guess.
Yes.
Or maybe Monica says it later. She says, because eventually she discovers the car crash. So maybe, I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah.
We can talk about it later.
I also want to point out something that I thought was kind of subtle through the direction, was that, during that opening scene when he's getting fired by his boss, which is very much like a, hey, bud, I'd rather be giving you a promotion. Am I right? The camera lingers on one of his work colleagues that's a woman in the room, and it creates this strange tension and animosity. And her neutral look kind of creates this feeling that she's responsible for what's happening in the eyes of Jeb. And then as soon as you see him see her, when he comes back in, it creates this feeling of dread. And I just thought that particularly was really well done and subtle.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things that I wrote down, and then we can talk about it when we get later to the end when, again, spoiler, when Cathy becomes evil, that like the first thing, he does is seek like vengeance, like revenge. And it's, that's what she does too. That's what Cathy does too later. And I think that was really a good like bookend for what happens when you're infected with evil, apparently.
Yeah.
Only on the X-Files would we say what happens when you're infected with evil. But I like that you point that out, JJ, because there was when we talked about Roadrunners, and that is an episode that is very hard for me to enjoy because I don't get that tension. For some reason, it just does not click in my brain that it is supposed to be like these people just don't feel threatening to me. And I know that, like, objectively, that's how it's meant to come across. It just doesn't hit me like that. But when you said that about, that tension building here, I definitely felt that. And I was nervous and scared. So I don't know why it's different.
Well, to be fair, you are a huge fan of parasitic worms.
I mean,
you talk about it constantly.
To be fair.
You're on your soapbox. You're like, what's the issue? It's a symbiotic relationship. Everybody's getting something out of it. I don't see why these people are threatening.
I just don't get it.
Fair enough. No, I thought that this was, and honestly, like this, and this might have been one of my favorite moments in the episode because it was so subtle. Because the episode isn't quite this subtle moving forward, in my opinion.
Not subtle. No, not subtle. I do think maybe the score could be lending some helping hand there for like to create that tension, the feeling of dread. I think the score could be helping. Usually for me, it's the music that really, gets the like amps up the tension part for me.
The snow-esque quality.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's a technical term.
We've got Monica Reyes showing up to investigate.
And this is the first time we've seen her since her debut, correct? And this is not happening.
Yes. And this is where we are reminded that she is an expert in satanic ritual murder.
Because she says it.
Yes, yeah. Uh-huh. Yep. Satanic ritual. Well, Scully gets to routinely announce that she's a medical doctor.
Exactly. Well, as a medical doctor.
Honestly, I'm surprised we don't hear more about satanic ritual murder going forward.
But yet, Mulder is never out there espousing that he, has a degree in psychology. Like,
no,
what is up with that?
From Oxford University.
So humble. I want to shout out a guest star here who, I think this episode is filled with criminally underused guest stars. The first one being Ron Canada, who plays the local cop here who is looking into this crime. And we just get him in this one scene. And he's a really great actor, and he's a character actor who... He's one of those, hey, it's that guy, who, you've probably seen in tons of things, particularly in 90s television. And he's got a great scene here, and, you're kind of waiting for him to pop back up in the story, or at least I was, and he's just... There's no spot for him. Yeah.
Well, we really pretty quickly abandon the actual crime that Monica Reyes is investigating in favor of chasing down Jeb. We don't really ever go back to this workplace again. So the location shifts pretty quickly. But it is a bummer, you're right.
I mean, I love seeing people like that show up on the X-Files because it really makes it feel, it's like you just said, like, hey, that guy.
Right.
Just like, because that's exactly what I did. I was watching. I was like, oh, hey, it's that guy. I know him.
That's my friend.
What's his name? Yeah, they're like investigating and everything, and this is where she talks about Marilyn Manson and Kmart and Blue Light Special.
I know
Marilyn Manson.
Yeah, and I think this was probably. This might have been my favorite Reyes scene in the episode as well. And, I'm saying all these things that don't bode well for the episode. Because it's like, oh, these great moments in the first 5 minutes. But, they are introducing a lot about her character that we don't already know. They're sort of reintroducing her to the audience. They have the thing about Nicorette gum. They're showing her bona fides. And she's got this kind of really fun, snappy scene with this local cop. And, you're immediately setting her up as an expert in her field in a very hands-on way. And it feels kind of Mulder-esque, where it's like she sort of got a little secret throughout the scene, where she is such an expert, but then there's maybe something underneath the surface that she's not quite sure about, but she knows that there's more going on.
Right. And it is where she introduces, in her kind of interactions, she introduces the idea of the catalyst, where this has probably happened because specifically Jeb Dukes was fired. And like that is, she is at that point not aware of the link of the evil that has jumped into him. But she says, there tends to be a catalyst, or I forget exactly how she phrases it, but she introduces this idea that like something has happened that is the catalyst, and ultimately we'll decide that is what let him be infected. Like that left him vulnerable to being infected by the evil, but she is right.
But it makes her sound so smart, and part of it is Ron Canada's performance, where, she's like, usually something sets off, maybe a firing, and Ron Canada's like, wait a second, this guy was fired from here. Recently.
What? Yeah, recently fired.
It's my first case. I'm very excited. But it sets her up as like, wow, she really knows what she's doing.
Yes. Clearly she's done this before.
Yes.
Yeah. I do love how capable she is. And it's fun because her character, she believes like Mulder. She believes in like the paranormal and has studied that and is an expert in that. But at the same time, she is very analytical like Scully. So she's kind of got a little bit of both of those characters mixed in. I feel like sometimes, when she's explaining things, it's like, well, this is a possibility, but it's probably actually this. And that's more Scully-esque to me, I think.
Yeah, it's funny. It's almost kind of contradictory because Reyes, you could argue that she's willing to believe even more than Mulder sometimes.
This time.
Yeah, absolutely, this time. Of course, we can talk about this, but Mulder is in such a different headspace at this point in the show.
Yeah.
Which is that's not a criticism. I think David Duchovny really shines in this episode, which I'm excited to talk about.
Okay, good. Yeah, me too.
But I think that, it's sort of like these contradictory elements in her character, which is, yes, she can be very practical, and she can be like, well, it's probably this, but it could be this, or even this. And as the episode goes on, I feel like she believes more and more in the possibilities of what this case can be and connected to Doggett's son. But I also feel like, in terms of the Scully connection, seeing a female FBI agent who is just really, really good at her job is just really, really great to see.
For sure. And I think that you make a really good point about it, because she's actually kind of on her way out. Like, she's come in, she's determined this is not satanic ritual murder, like, just because he has this CD, and she's on her way out. And then she has her the vision of like the body that's all charred and ashy, like ashes or whatever. And that's when she decides, she kind of walks back, like, her level of interest in what is happening, because she, I feel like she's done. She's come what she's done what she's here to do.
Like, let's roll the credits, folks.
Yeah, like, her part is done, and then she decides, wait, no, there might be something else here. And that's what moves us forward,
And I like that visual representation too, because it's sort of like that touched by evil sort of, like, it helps you really get the hint about what's going on. Like, it wasn't just like a regular crime, it was an evil crime.
Right.
So
it's just like
evil.
Not one of these regular evil crimes.
It's just, Also, I think it's interesting to kind of think about the idea of evil in the X-Files, because it's not really this is not the first time that they've really examined the subject. You got kind of like in Beyond the Sea, it sort of manifests in different ways, and then even irresistible.
Without a doubt, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This always brings me back to grotesque, too. Because
Yes.
Mulder does that whole deep dive,
Right.
and does he pick up evil that way? Or, like, how close can he get to evil,
Yeah. I
like
think
that.
there's some interesting comparisons there. JJ, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And, irresistible comes to mind, grotesque. And, when you think about it that way, it's sort of a theme throughout the show. Like, where, a show that deals a lot with monsters, both figuratively and literally. It makes sense that they would want to dive a little deeper into evaluating, like, where these things come from. And, again, we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves chronologically, but Mulder has his wonderful sort of opining about the nature of evil through his experience. And, as he's delivering that speech, you can, if you're an avid fan, you can sort of fill in some blanks with his case history from those episodes to see how Mulder could sort of come to that kind of conclusion. And, on top of that, and just all of these seedy characters in this government conspiracy that he has encountered throughout the years, and seeing how they have sort of fallen in with, this kind of thinking and, this sort of, evil finding root in all these places in Mulder's experience. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it's interesting that they kind of treat this almost like a disease.
Right.
Where, the people get infected with evil.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not necessarily something that, it doesn't pass automatically. You have to be susceptible to it.
Yeah, and it's kind of, like, it's, I wouldn't say it's a common sense thing, but it is a philosophical thing, and I think what this episode does is it takes that philosophy and it makes it real through this plot. So you could absolutely see this as being a metaphor, the entire episode acting as a metaphor for what happens to allow people to give in to their worst nature.
It's so good. This is why I love this episode.
Well,
Tell me more, Cortlan.
So good. It's
Tell me
so
more.
good. I'm sorry. No, this is why I love this. I just think it's really, especially, and we can talk about it later because, like JJ said, we're getting ahead of ourselves chronologically. But like that scene in the hallway with Mulder and Doggett is, I think, my favorite scene from this episode. And I think that's why, like, I think for me, it feels really like something like this moment that you can, for Mulder, trace like back through everything that we've seen Mulder do. And even before that, when Mulder was just profiling, regular serial killers, it feels like a really like culmination kind of moment for me. And I just love that about this particular point in time for him.
Yeah, and I would counterpoint. You're like, that's what I love so much about that episode. And I would say that's what really frustrates me about this episode, is that there's these really, really great bright spots in this through line, and I just don't think that it comes together as well that it may have if this was an episode that took place in a different time in the show, and could tell this story in a slightly tighter way that didn't involve so many characters to the point where I feel like some parts of the plot take a back seat to some of the larger show stuff that's happening, and then vice versa, like some of the larger show stuff that's happening has to take a back seat to the plot. It's just like trying to shove all this stuff into a package that there's only so much space for.
Yeah. Well, I think that's totally fair criticism of this particular episode. I do think it needs to be tighter than what we get. Like, I think that's a really good way of phrasing it. I do enjoy how many characters are in this episode, though.
Okay,
so
yeah, fair. No, absolutely. And you're absolutely right. Like,
We
when
can
this
talk about
episode
it more.
shines, it shines. And it's just like,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Like, I really enjoy all the stuff that you're pointing to is so great. I guess I'm being selfish. I'm being a glutton. I want more. Yeah.
But it is true, I think, that it doesn't quite connect. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's why it's easier to kind of talk about the different threads rather than go in order, because it skips around so much to the different characters, like it's
There is some extreme back and forth here.
Yeah.
yeah, and it just shifts so much in tone.
Yeah, and there's a Mad About You episode in the center of this as well.
Yeah. Well, so the very next scene, like after we leave Monica Reyes and her Kmart references, we jump straight to Mad About You.
An uncomfortably pregnant Dana Scully.
Oh my goodness.
You can feel how
miserable.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Like, we had a baby in 2020, and watching her just walk across that room to answer the door, I'm like, yes, that's...
Yeah, I feel like
Veritas.
Gillian Anderson knew what she was doing. Like, good for you,
Yeah.
Gillian Anderson. She was like, I'm going to show you.
Like, I have been pregnant before. I will bring that to this performance.
Yeah.
Do you feel like this is almost a way of Mulder implying that he's potentially not the father? Like, what is why are they doing this? Why are they writing this?
So
It's
weird.
just
It's such a weird choice.
so bizarre and awkward.
I think you can think about this in a couple of different ways. You can think about it in the world of the show, where these characters are living, breathing people with motivations. Or you could think about it where there's a bunch of people in the writer's room where they're like, we don't know what to do yet, so let's be ambiguous about it. And it's frustrating as a viewer and as a repeat viewer, because you want all of this to make sense in some way. And so you sort of have to create your own little headcanon for it. And for me, I think that Mulder is still very insecure about his feelings and the relationship status that he has with Scully. And I think that that's the case for Scully, too. And I think they're still trying to navigate, like, what are we to each other? And we both know where this baby came from. I think, or maybe Scully knows more than Mulder does, because Mulder may allow some inkling of doubt in his mind. But, in the world of the show, I think that these are two very intelligent, very capable, but very awkward people who are trying to figure out what to do next. And, I think that is supported by the fact that he comes and he brings this gift. This gift that we find has a lot of significance to him and his family and his mother who has passed away. And I think a lot of what is happening, you want to talk about season 8 as a whole. We're watching Mulder grow up in a lot of ways after he comes back from the abduction. And I think scenes like this really show that Mulder is trying to figure out who he is now that he's transitioning into this new time in his life. And I think this moment shows that he really wants Scully to be a part of it. And so
I know. It's actually, it's so interesting because as I was rewatching the other day and thinking about this scene in particular, it feels so awkward on so many levels. And I think one thing, I was thinking about as a viewer, for me, why does this feel so awkward? We're very accustomed to seeing moments between Mulder and Scully that are intimate, but always in relation to a case.
Yes.
And this scene happens so early in this episode that the case has not come into at least their sphere at all. This has nothing to do with an X-File. This has nothing to do with work. This is purely domestic between them. And I was trying to think of other scenes like that come before, and I had a really hard time, even thinking, what scene could we even compare this to that is purely domestic between them? And I think you're right. This is clearly a time of transition for them, and it does feel weird because it's not something that we are accustomed to seeing from them either. And so I think that it does stick out a little bit like a sore thumb because it's just not something that we're used to. As far as the Mulder and Scully that we're used to seeing on the screen together are always at work in some capacity. And so, and they're not at work. There's nothing to do with work. This is Mulder visiting on a Saturday morning to give her a gift.
Right.
And it has nothing to do with anything until, eventually it does.
Right. I think you hit the nail on the head there. And I think it does show, again, there's this feeling that there's this whole relationship between Mulder and Scully that's happening off screen, particularly during season 7. And I don't know, like, there's tons of fanfic out there depicting that stuff. But when I watch this scene, I'm like, I don't know. Maybe there isn't that much. Maybe these folks are really trying to figure something out and just feel as awkward as we do, even though they both know how they feel about one another. And it's kind of it's tragic in a lot of ways.
Oh, it's kind of brutal. It's like really devastating that it's going to take so much effort for them to just be happy.
Yes, but thankfully they find happiness so easily in the later seasons.
And obviously they live happily ever after. No, absolutely not. No, but I do think it's just, it does feel like that, where we're kind of, we all individually have, our own headcanon about what has been happening when they're not on the screen. And then very suddenly we have this like window of like, maybe this is what's happening when they're not on the screen. And it's very odd. And I mean, we have no way, in my personal headcanon, this is very awkward because Mulder has been dead for a while.
That could
and
be
is now suddenly not.
Can you imagine being dead and then coming back and being like, "Oh, Scully,
right?" Like
you're pregnant.
Like in my mind, that's
yeah.
But you're right. Like who knows? Like maybe they're always like this. We don't know.
Taking the scene for what it is, it's like, this relationship really is so complicated. It's
my
just
goodness.
so
Yeah. And it does arrive. I mean, it has to arrive where it does in the timeline because we're running out of time now. And as we mentioned, we're well into the back half of season 8. Like we're running out of time now. And so we have to do something to move them along. But it is very odd to follow satanic ritual murder with Mad About You and the Pizza Man.
Yeah. And I'll go back to the idea that this episode tries to be maybe too many things. And I wonder if they would have had a couple more episodes to play with, if the seasons weren't shortened by this point, for them to do an episode that really focused on this and had a case at the center of it that might have really helped to bring this out. And letting this other case sort of stand on its own and really be a Doggett Reyes showcase.
Yeah.
And it's so tough to get, at least for me, to be engaged in that part of the story when there's some really great performances happening between Duchovny and Anderson that frankly are very much at the periphery of what's going on in the main plot of the episode.
It reminds me, like, when I was just listening to you just now, it reminded me a lot of how I feel about Home Again in the revival. Because that is another one where it feels like we have two kind of distinct things happening that we've tried to, like, smush together into this one episode. And maybe they both would have been better on their own. But it is, again, another one that I really like.
Yeah,
even in spite of those things. Like, and so listening to you talk about it just now, I think that makes perfect sense in terms of this episode.
Yeah, that's a great point about Home Again, where you've got, you want your A and B stories to sort of come together at the end. And, again, like, I think that that's a memorable episode. That I think I remember when season 10 was announced. Do you guys remember this when we just had the episode titles and they said Home Again? They're like, oh, back to the Peacock Farm.
So exciting.
We're gonna see. It's like, oh no, guys, it's actually not that at all.
Massive.
I hope you like hospital scenes and garbage trucks because you're gonna get a lot of them.
And Band-Aids.
And Band-Aids.
Disgusting.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, sorry. That just, it really reminded me of exactly how I feel about Home Again.
That's such a great
I think
point.
that's Okay. Anyway.
Yeah.
So we are like 3 scenes into this episode.
All right. So then the opening credits come up.
It's fine.
I will say that, like, once again, Dana Scully is going to wind up in the hospital, and it just makes me like heavy sigh. Like, come on. Wasn't there a way to do this?
How do you feel about the way she just kind of keels over and, like, it's very sudden?
Medical inaccuracies aside, I just felt like that was a little bit tired as far as writing Dana Scully's story goes. Like, I think there's probably other ways they could have done that, and this was just the most expedient way to, like, I don't know. It was just, it always kind of bums me out. And I'm like, man, once again, she's going to the hospital for, like, a threat to her life. Like, come on. You know, anything else would have been fine.
I think that from a plot standpoint, like, when you get to the end of the episode, you see all of the contrivances that they've had to put into the script in order to have these two storylines come together. I'll say come together in quotations, because literally they come together in the same place, where you have this one hospital that happens to hold Dana Scully, who's having this scare with her pregnancy, and also this killer who has been brought in with a gunshot wound, apparently who was in the range of this particular hospital. You really have to sort of, buy into that and sort of set aside your disbelief. But also from a script point, it's clear that, I mean, again, we're just like all this stuff going on in this episode, because we haven't even brought up the fact that there is this tension between Mulder and Doggett, and basically they've got sort of, this unspoken animosity that is 100% related to Scully. And
it really is.
And who's going to be the guy that isn't the husband who wants to go into the room? And so you sort of create the situation where, like, Scully is their touchstone in this hospital, and it's the place where they're going back to, and it's the place where they encounter each other. So from a plot standpoint, it's like, okay, yeah, we need to find a way to have these two characters interact, but it's like, great, and then Scully gets to be like a chess piece in this plot. Yeah,
the showdown in the hospital hallway is a note that I have in my little, as I went through.
Showdown in the hospital hallway.
Showdown. They have a lot of hallway conversations, and there are a lot of hallways in the rest of this episode, so that's funny. And then also, it's hilarious to me that Monica Reyes' first phone call is to a man she has only ever met when he was dead, Fox Mulder.
Well, I did meet you, but you were dead, so.
Right. Like, okay. How did she even get his phone number? Like,
yes. Oh, your voice is deeper than I thought it was going to be. Who is this?
Right. Right. And he's like, the look on his face when he answered, he's like, who? Like, who are you? Why are you calling me? Like, I thought it was really okie dokie.
Duchovny gets to play some really fun moments in this episode.
He does,
with Reyes, because a lot of his scenes with her, like, she's talking at him, and he's got these little looks, and he's like, who is this crank? And it's just like, it's you, Mulder. Happening? It's you.
Right. How did they never come across each other before? Because, oh my goodness.
That would have been interesting.
It really would have been great.
I kind of felt like the tension at the beginning, like when Mulder and Doggett come together at the hospital, like we were talking about, like this is one of the hallway cover, and just this whole scene where it's just a lot, and it's like, who's the daddy? Yeah,
let's talk about this nurse who's an MVP of the episode.
You fellas just don't listen. It's one of my favorite things.
Amazing. She was so great.
That it is strange though that, I mean, like, Doggett, it's obviously not Doggett. Like everybody knows. Like, I mean, it's not Doggett. Like, we get it. But I like that the idea, and I think this is one of those things you have to fill in for yourself. Like, the idea of their competing interests for Scully is really, because obviously, or we would hope that they both want the best for Scully, and they both feel like the other person is threatening what is the best for Scully, or it's really very strange, their hallway showdown.
Because, like, Doggett kind of thinks Mulder's a crank, and Mulder's like, who are you?
Yeah, and Mulder, we saw in 3 words, he is not great for Scully. Like, he's actively doing things that are not good for Scully at that point. And, like, he gets some leeway because he was dead for a while. But
I was dead at the time. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, but still, he makes some decisions that are pretty harmful, or could be pretty harmful for everyone.
And to be fair, that's that's Mulder's MO, like,
Yeah,
throughout the
yeah.
series.
Right.
And again, like, in this episode, we see him, I think, really trying to course correct and really trying to
Yeah.
be like, okay,
Agreed.
what's my priority here? But as soon as he
Right.
thinks he's out, they keep pulling him back in.
But, and I think, but especially from John Doggett's perspective, as he has investigated Mulder, so he knows that Mulder is kind of like a loose cannon. And then he watched him do it in a way that was pretty harmful to Dana Scully, who is also experiencing trauma of her own story in this season. I think John Doggett has really good reason to be like, what are you doing and why,
Right,
like
absolutely.
to be pretty wary of Mulder. And yeah, it's pretty interesting.
I think it was during this scene, I watched this with my wife last night, and the two of them there, and she did say something like, who would think that Doggett was...
Right, thank you. Who is watching being like, maybe it's Doggett.
Yeah,
It's not.
and then later she's just like, Mulder's so hot. I was just like, why is he hot? And she's like, I don't know. He brings her pizza and
Yeah,
gifts.
it's the shirt sleeves. He has a whole series of scenes where he has, for some reason, put like a dress shirt and tie back on and has like rolled up his shirt sleeves again.
For the
I don't know
ladies.
why
Yeah.
he gets dressed up like that.
I don't
but
know. She was like, yeah, just seeing Mulder and Doggett next to each other, it's just tough. I was like, they're like two different art styles that are next to each other, and they both have their
not the same.
merits, but it's tough to beat that classic Mulder.
Exactly.
man.
Well, I mean, after
No.
you've been dead a while, the first thing you would definitely want to do is put on a necktie, I'm sure.
Of course.
Just hilarious choice to me, but
course.
that's fine. It does look good though, so we'll take it.
It does. It does. We appreciate the rolled up sleeves.
Yeah.
There's a spreadsheet for that.
I like Mulder's fashion choices throughout the season because he's either wearing his regular duds or it's leather jacket with sweater underneath.
Yes,
That's
with
like
sweater.
the variant action figure for season 8. Regular suited Mulder or leather jacket variant. Did you go shopping with Krychek last weekend? What's going on?
You did. Maybe he like inherited, so like maybe Krychek like left him a box of clothes something like somewhere, like or like thrift store shopping from Krychek's. I don't know.
Thought you'd like these.
Welcome back. Like,
Or maybe he inherited them from his mom, just like the doll. Like, yeah, I inherited this doll
Oh
and
my goodness.
just a ton of leather jackets that were in my size for some reason. I'm not sure what that's all about.
like a
but-
storage unit. His mom left him like a storage unit full of stuff. And that's just all he has now.
Yeah, my mom had like, I didn't know, an online shop for leather men's jackets. And so I'm just...
And sweaters.
And sweaters, yeah, all in my size. Very strange. She sold very few of them, so I've got an overstock here.
Oh boy.
Amazing.
Mrs. Mulder's Leather Emporium. Like the t-shirts.
does
Tina's
not
Leather Emporium.
That's not right.
Leather Emporium. That's why I didn't do well. People were expecting something else and very disappointed. These are all
Yeah,
just
they
size
were. They
medium
came
jackets.
for something else and it wasn't.
Right. What episode are we talking about? What?
This is a sweater episode.
The sweater.
Okay,
episode.
goodness.
No.
Well, I feel like the next scene in my list is that Jeb, all I wrote down is Jeb continues to be not subtle. So
Yeah.
Jeb is on the move this whole time while we're busy.
Was this the phone booth scene? Mm-hmm. Where that woman knocks on the booth and is like, "Excuse me, sir, if you could please murder me, just as fast as you possibly can, I would really appreciate that."
It really seemed to me too like the phone booth was very far from where the cars are.
Yes.
Like they parked and then had to walk like quite a ways to get to the phone booth.
Yeah.
So interesting rest stop.
And it's weird because, yeah, this episode's from 2001, but I'm still like, wouldn't you have a cell phone, lady? Like, I don't know. We've been watching our agents have cell phones since season 1, but I guess you could still do this plot
in Livonia,
2001.
Georgia. There's no signal there. Yeah.
There you go.
Right.
No
That's true.
signal.
There's probably no sermon.
Yeah, I guess I wanted her to
Service.
give us all that exposition to hold the cell phone up and say, I have a cell phone, but there's no signal out here.
Maybe use the cell phone to tap on the phone booth. Like, excuse me, this is broken.
But then don't mention it, so you're like, did she just tap on the glass with a cell phone? Deleted scene.
Either way, that lady was very clearly getting murdered.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
I don't.
It's so sad. Yeah.
There was no
Literally
way
her
around that.
only purpose in the episode was to show up just to get murdered.
Right. Right. I was going to say, in the script, and you're going to be murdered woman 1. And here are your lines. So let's run it.
But just the look on Jeb's face, like, as he, like, turns, he's, like, horrified because he knows he's about to murder this lady. But also, it's just very clearly not subtle. Did she run away? Like, run away. If someone looks at you like that in a phone booth in the middle of nowhere, Georgia.
Right. I was waiting
Get
for him
out.
to then, like, cheat to camera and, like, give us a look like, here we go again.
Round 2. Like, not subtle. Not subtle. And then we get in the van window, right? We get his reflection.
Yes.
Jeb stands around and looks at himself in the mirror.
And sees flame.
Anytime somebody is in a random phone booth and flames are in their eyeballs, I kind of feel like that's a reason to run.
Yeah, I would think that's a great reason.
Yeah.
So, like, more Mulder and Doggett stuff. And then Reyes shows up, right?
You think we get Mulder and Monica first, right?
Yeah, because he ends up at the crime scene.
Talk about Luke, John Doggett, and all of that going on. Let's talk about that scene.
Yeah. Well, yeah, this is where we learn a lot more because Mulder meets Monica in another hallway.
Oh, right.
Right?
Right.
Is that when they're in the hallway? I can't remember. And we learn about Doggett. We learn a lot more about Doggett's son.
Right.
From Monica, who I guess investigated that crime.
Yes, I guess she was with the New York Bureau of the FBI back when Doggett
Right.
was still with the NYPD. And when the case went to the feds, she led the investigation and worked side by side with Doggett in trying to first find his missing son and then eventually, investigate who the murderer was.
I really love the little line we get from Mulder where he says, I wasn't aware of this, or he says something like that, where he's like looking at the file and it's like clearly devastating.
Yeah.
He's like, I wasn't, he didn't know any of this. I mean, why would he? How would he know any of this? But
Right.
I like this like moment where he's like, oh wait, this is a real person. Not
Yeah.
like an anonymous man that I should just not like,
Right. And maybe seeing shades of himself in that this man
Yeah, agreed.
has been, crippled by this devastating loss, which was exactly
Yes.
what, put Mulder on the path that he was on.
Yeah, because Mulder is from a house that lost a child, and I think that's, a moment of, recognition.
Right. And so, we get somewhat of an exposition dump in this scene, but it works because it's dumped on Mulder, who doesn't have it. But then we're starting to kind of get into the more supernatural aspects of this episode in terms of what Reyes is starting to investigate. And, something that occurred to me throughout this plot line was Reyes' motivation. Because obviously they're still trying to find out who killed his son. And I feel like that motivation is strong in this scene where they feel like we could actually possibly make a connection to what's going on here. But I feel like that connection starts to dwindle throughout the episode and it becomes a lot more about this sort of ethereal idea of evil. And I would say that for me that's a little bit of a criticism of the trajectory of the episode. But I felt like in this scene it was still sort of like, let's investigate this. There may be a connection to the death and we might actually be able to solve this case.
Yeah. Well, I think that's totally fair because I think she even says at various points, she says, I think this is the same evil, and clearly it's a case that haunts her because she talks about how, go cry your eyes out in the bathroom kind of case.
Which she gives that line very nonchalantly. She's like, cry your eyes in the bathroom kind of
I
case.
feel like maybe Monica Reyes cries her eyes out in the bathroom a lot.
So that she
I
can
think-
keep this really together
Yes,
exterior.
yeah. I think she has maybe more than one of those, kinds of cases in her memory.
I would love to see more of that of her. I feel like she's so together in this episode, and I think somewhat to the episode's detriment because they're dealing with this really devastating case, and I know that Reyes's thing is that she brings kind of like a lightness and levity to the proceedings, but
I don't think she does that yet, though. I think that happens for Monica Reyes much later. I think right now, like, her whole thing is that there's this really terrible evil in the world that she's trying to find. But then she does say later toward the end, like, maybe it wasn't about Luke at all. Like, it was, it turns out they were chasing this evil, and maybe this evil did kill Luke, but we're not here to solve it for Luke. We're here to solve it for, this other kid. She says something like that later. And so you're right about that. I think that the personal connection to it definitely fades as we go.
Yeah. And it's just one of those things in the episode where, it's nice that they tie it up with that line, but it does, for me, get to, like, what are our characters' motivations here? What's Doggett's motivation here? If it's not really about finding his son's killer, and he doesn't really buy into sort of this pseudo, science or this sort of philosophical aspect to it, it does become a little murky for me in terms of, like, what are we driving towards and what's the resolution?
True. Fair. Totally fair. And we get that yet another confrontation in the hallway where he gets real mad that anyone's even talking about it.
Big Doggett energy.
Another hallway showdown.
Yes. So,
with yelling this time.
All hallways, no rooms. I don't want a single scene in a room in this episode. I want everyone going.
Well, the only room we get is Scully's hospital room, where everyone goes to have their visions of the past. So
yeah. If there's a scene in a room, I want there to be a bed in that room and Scully to be lying in it. I don't know who I am in this scenario. This is Chris Carter's mandate for this episode.
Is that what he sounds?
Yes. More Scullys in beds, more hallways, less rooms.
More shouting in hallways, yeah.
Can we get some digital flames in this scene somewhere? Get on it.
Like in the background.
In the background.
No, any reflective surface must be full.
Yes.
Of flames.
So Doggett comes in hot here, and this is one of those scenes where it's like Robert Patrick's like doing jumping jacks off camera, and then he's just got to burst into the scene.
He's getting hyped, yeah. He's getting hyped.
And he's mad because somehow he's found out that Mulder is digging into his background, which Doggett absolutely did to Mulder in the last episode, and that was totally fine. But
for like the last 15 episodes, all he's done is dig into Mulder's background.
Yeah.
So that's his whole purpose. To get into the X-Files, that's what he did, was dig into Mulder's
How dare you
background.
Investigate me who's investigating you?
Yeah. It's a little funny that Mulder hadn't done it yet. Hadn't even.
He's busy.
Okay.
He's a busy guy.
He was.
He's running his mom's leather coat business now. He's
the leather emporium.
He's a walking billboard for that emporium, and
he's going to become an Instagram influencer based on the leather emporium. Wait, that's an AU that no one has talked about yet. So
I hope that we see a whole genre of stories about this emporium coming out of this podcast.
Here we go, fanfic writers, get on it.
I'm adding it to my list.
There you go. I will illustrate a poster for every one of those fanfics that is published. That is my
you
pledge.
Just volunteered to do a lot of work.
My gosh.
JJ just volunteered to do a lot of work for free.
Oh my gosh. The biggest mistake of his life.
I'm definitely writing this.
You sealed your own fate.
Yep.
I don't think fans want to see me just draw picture after picture of Mulder in leather. That doesn't sound like something the community would do.
Oh boy, paging Cathy Glinski wherever you are.
She bursts through my wall here somehow.
She dials into this call right now. Okay. She's here.
How did you hack into the Zoom meeting? We love you, Cathy.
Yes.
So Reyes sort of has to break up this little scene here, right?
Well, this is all her fault, so, yeah.
Yeah. And after this, we've got Catha Dukes, right? That's where we meet Catha.
Who luckily lives nearby.
Oh, yeah. I mean, again, like, the circumstances... And this is, again, I'll say again, watching this episode with my wife, she's really good at picking up on this stuff. She's like, so where does she live? I said, she lives in Maryland. Okay, but this guy was living in New Orleans? It's like, yeah, he moved down there, but now... Yeah, okay, yes, it's all kids.
Yeah, he's taking a long drive. So mostly what Jeb Dukes does in this episode is murder people and drive.
Yes, and drives toward our main characters, which is very nice of him.
Yeah, again, very conveniently located relative for Jeb.
Just outside of
here in
D.C.
Maryland.
Yeah, absolutely. And part of me wanted to be like, well, that, like, is where all this other stuff happened. But it's like, no, the other stuff happened in New York.
In New York, yeah.
So,
Yes. Because eventually we're going to talk about Bob Harvey, the guy in the car crash, who also was part of the investigation into Luke Doggett. Like, how did he get to New Orleans? What was he doing in New Orleans?
I know. Yeah.
The world is mysterious. Yeah.
It's all contrived by the evil. The evil brought everything together.
Yes.
And made it all happen.
There you go.
I guess.
I guess so. In order to fit this episode into an hour time block, yes.
Something like that. Yeah.
But yeah, and I mean, yeah, Cathy Dukes is going to explain that, like, Jeb would never do any of these things. Life does the corrupting. So she's going to give us another outlook about how we become vulnerable.
And this is one of those scenes where as soon as her and her daughter come on screen, it's like, oh man, this kid's going to be taken captive in the last scene.
Yep.
I've seen this show before. They did not disappoint. Spoilers.
Like Cortlan said before, Scully's hospital room is where people go to see things.
Yes.
It will bring about visions of the past.
The fading out backgrounds that just keeps happening to poor Doggett. And you really feel his pain and his loss. And I cannot even begin to imagine just how utterly devastating that must have been. But
yeah. This is the first time I've seen this episode since I became a dad. And, you can think about these things theoretically and be like, oh, it must be so hard to lose a child. But then you have a child and you're like, oh, I didn't really understand how, like, I couldn't even imagine, how do you get up in the morning, let alone, have a job and, do all of these things that adults have to do while carrying that burden. In terms of the episode, I have a question for you guys. If you had to name a protagonist in this story, who would it be?
That's a good question.
We'll cut all the silence out.
Yeah, no,
out.
sorry. Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm just thinking, I think my gut here is to say that this is Monica's episode. That Monica Reyes is the protagonist in this episode. Monica.
Follow your gut. Sarah, what's your gut tell you?
Yeah, no, I agree because she's the driving force. She's the one that keeps pushing. Because if it wasn't for Monica, she could have very easily just left it at the crime scene to begin with. And, but because she keeps pushing and because she keeps, insisting on following her gut and her intuition, we have an episode. Because otherwise nothing else would have happened if not for her.
So that's interesting to me because I felt the same way until this scene. And then I feel like the episode is trying to say, hey, how this has been Reyes' episode? Well, let's shift to Doggett's perspective. And it's kind of jarring for me because obviously this episode has a ton to do with Doggett and his backstory. But up until now, we have sort of been experiencing it through the eyes of Reyes. And as soon as this scene came up, I found myself wishing to see it from Reyes' perspective, to see what she saw. And realize that while they allude to her vision in the opening scenes where she sees the body in New Orleans, we never really see her, visually connect that for us. We have to wait until Doggett.
Yeah, we don't see her remember Luke Doggett. We see Doggett remember Luke Doggett. Yeah, that's a good point.
But for some reason, we're given Doggett's recollection of it. And it just seems, again, this episode really kind of jumps around a little bit in terms of its perspectives. And it is great to see all these characters in the episode. I know you mentioned that, Cortlan, that you like seeing all these characters. But for me, I'm like, well, let's stick with let's figure out who's the protagonist of this episode, and let's try and follow the story through them. Not that we can't jump around, but this was a real shift for me in terms of the storytelling.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair, actually. And I hadn't really thought about it that way, that we don't see her memory of the case. We're going to see Doggett's memory.
And just, her telling what happened.
As opposed to showing.
Yeah. We do, and we are going to, Doggett is having this memory in Scully's hospital room where they talk about being afraid to believe. Like, this is like the best conversation between Doggett and Scully, where they have their mutual skepticism. Yeah, she's very articulate about her skepticism and like very reflective on her own self, even though maybe that's what happens when Scully's on drugs, is she gets very like self-reflective. I don't know.
This is a great performance by Gillian Anderson too.
Oh my gosh.
Who really doesn't have a lot to work with in terms of dialogue, but really just...
Although she does have what I think is another very heartbreaking line, and she says, "Who's we? Like, we've been worried about you. Who's we? Oh my, that is
middle
so
schoolers.
Sad.
Like,
that's so sad. Right.
These are teenagers. It's like, who else? Was there somebody else who's interested? Like, it's just like, yes, Mulder was here.
Yeah, like, oh, that's so sad. Like, come on. Oh. Why would you make her ask that?
Devastating. I know. So angsty. This is a season of angst, if nothing else, I think.
Yeah.
Oh,
and then Doggett totally just, like, they have this moment and she starts to drift off and he has a flashback. And then Scully comes out of it like, what? Why did you ask? And he's just like, I gotta go. Good luck with your whatever's going on here. Good luck.
Yeah.
I didn't ask.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Which one of them was medicated at the time? I mean, technically it's Scully because she's in the
which
hospital.
Which one of them needed to be medicated?
What is Doggett doing?
Might be the question. I did quite like the effects that they used to pull him from the room into his flashback. I thought that was very effective.
I like that. The way they did that was very nice. Yes, agreed. I do think, though, that this line, just before we leave this weird vision conversation, that this line about being afraid to believe in possibilities made me think about what we're going to see later in Existence. Not to spoil the whole season for everyone, since we've already thoroughly spoiled this episode. But, eventually Mulder and Scully have that conversation where he says, I think we were afraid to believe in the possibilities or what. He says something like that. And I was like, oh, right.
Which keys back into the earlier scene, too, which is these two characters, they're literally having trouble acknowledging by themselves what their relationship is and where it has gone before.
Yeah.
I.e., the physical portion of their relationship.
Right. The side that has nothing to do with any case.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's anyway. That moment from Scully reminded me that, like, oh wait, we're going to talk about this later.
Right. And then Doggett goes from the secondary location of the episode, her room, into the primary location of the episode, which is a hallway. So we've got it back. It's the bread and butter of this episode, hallways. Where do we jump to after this?
I think Mulder is at work. Mulder has gone to work.
In the office.
He's put on his suit, his dress shirt. He's not wearing a jacket. He's got his tie, got his sleeves rolled up. He's in it now.
Yes.
He's in this investigation into Luke Doggett.
And he's going through files and Reyes pops in, right? And they have some fun repartee about how it's not his office anymore.
And how they need someone who is willing to believe.
Right. Yes.
Something.
It just felt, this scene, I like this scene. Again, I think David Duchovny gets to have so much fun in this episode because I think part of it is because his character is really on the periphery of this story. And he doesn't actually have anything to do, if you think about it. He's going to these places, he's looking up things, but he's not really adding anything into the investigation. I think that his one meaningful moment in terms of this part of the plot is when he just sort of has that heart-to-heart with Doggett. But he's not adding anything to the actual investigation. He's just sort of along for the ride.
In fact, I think in this scene with Monica, he kind of says, like, there's nothing here. Like, he's not even really chasing what she's chasing at this point. And that's why she gives him that little line about needing somebody willing, with an open mind, because he's not even really following what she's following at this point. And he does that little look at the desk where he's like,
oh, it was so good. Yeah, I really do.
I laughed so hard.
I think Duchovny does a lot with these scenes beyond the dialogue in them. He has this mood, these vibes where it's just like, what's going on? Like, who are you?
Like, I think he at this point it's pretty clear that he is very intrigued by Monica Reyes.
Yes.
Like, he's like, I think I like you, but also he's busy doing this other important thing. Like, he's clearly very torn between, like, he keeps saying over and over again, my friend is in the hospital. Well, sir, your friend is Dana Scully.
Right.
Like, everybody knows.
My friend, we're friends. We're just friends.
Right.
Did she say anything about me?
Right.
Did she suggest that there might be...
Oh my gosh.
Anyway.
Does she check yes or no?
Yeah.
Could you give her this note for me? Let's see.
You know what? Hold on one second. Let me add a maybe
my
box
girlfriend.
because I just want to give her a third choice.
Right. Yes, no, maybe.
And he flexes a little bit in terms of the files because she sort of questions.
Yeah.
She's like, I think I know these files.
I think I know these files.
X-Files.
Yeah. She doesn't care.
Yeah, she does not. But it was nice to see Mulder at his desk again. I was waiting for him to just sort of chuck one of his pencils into the ceiling before he left.
I know. It would have been great, just on the way out.
Right, exactly.
Toss it over his shoulder.
But she is, she, like you said, like, she's getting him more and more sort of pulled into this case, to the point where, he's gonna, continue to investigate as much as he can. But honestly, like, talking about, like, he's not seeing what she's seeing, and maybe not, but part of me is like, well, I think he is seeing what she's seeing, but I think part of Mulder might be like, so what? Like, I don't know. There's just not a lot of meat on these bones when it comes to this concept. Because it's like, yes, evil can transfer just whatever sort of wishy-washy thing she's talking about. But for Mulder, it's like, okay, what do we think to accomplish here?
Right. Well, and I think, too, we see that even clearer when they're all out in wherever they are, South Carolina, wherever Jim's last
somewhere
murder
between
is.
New Orleans and...
They're out there. They all go.
Yeah.
Everybody goes. And so, and he, Mulder, we get that from Mulder a lot more at that point where he, Doggett's like, what am I doing here? And Mulder's like, yeah, I'm asking myself the same question.
Yeah.
And then he kind of says to Reyes, like, I get it, but if he doesn't get it, then there's nothing we can do about it. He's kind of like, he gets it and is willing to let this go because
there's really not a lot here. Because it really, and I think this is the scene where I realized, like, okay, so this isn't really about catching a killer. This is about not even closure, just sort of some sort of better understanding as to why things happen.
Yeah, I think this is trying to understand.
Yeah, and I think for Mulder and for Doggett, it's like, so what? It's just like, and for Reyes, it is sort of this philosophical venture. And I think it's one that Doggett isn't willing to accept, and that Mulder realizes, if he's not willing to accept it, there's nothing else to be gained.
Mulder doesn't see the point in pursuing this any further on that, at least in that line.
And he doesn't. No. This is the end of the case for him in this episode. Mm-hmm. And they're at this crime scene where he's left his the woman who was begging to be murdered. Yes.
His friend.
Right. And unfortunately they didn't have the budget to build a full-scale hallway outside in the forest here to have this scene in, but it's still effective.
There was no hallway at the rest stop.
That's true, right? Actually, something that at the start of this scene, as they're panning across the crime scene, and you have local police there. There's two cops who are they're just super chummy. They look like they're having the best day of their lives. They're just joking around, walking towards the body with each other, and I'm like, what's their story? What is going on with these guys?
A woman has been murdered in the woods.
How are your kids? Yeah, absolutely. Timmy just made the football
Great
team.
day. They're old buddies.
Yeah, I gotta get
They
down there.
clearly have just had a trip to Tina Mulder's leather shop.
Say again. Yeah.
That's true.
So this woman now, as long as you're the specific size jacket, she's got tons of stuff. She's just
Mulder gave him a card,
Yeah.
like on the. They just got there. They were chatting with Mulder before
if
we
you're
got there.
42 regular, all the leather coats that you would want any other size, don't even bother. Only one size.
Oh man, the Leather Emporium.
Oh my goodness. But then Mulder goes to the hospital to see Scully.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes,
Or did we pass
Mulder
that?
is done with this case, so he's
Like,
he
I'm
leaves.
going to see my friend.
Go
We're
back to
just
Scully.
friends. She's in the hospital.
Yeah.
She hasn't had time to answer the note yet.
Right.
We don't know.
She's going to bring her a pencil so that she can fill the note out. Yes, no, maybe. Are we just friends?
This is the cutest little scene. This feels much more, and as I was watching it, I was comparing this hospital scene to the scene in the apartment earlier, and I'm like, right, but see, now they're talking about the case.
And it's much easier for them.
It's right. Like, this feels much more like every other intimate scene we've ever seen between them, because guess what? They're talking about the case.
And there's a moment
And
in the scene when Scully is like, so you're working on a case?
She totally changes the subject. Yeah, he like reaches over and like feels the little baby, and it's really cute. And she's like, "So there's a case." She totally changes the subject.
These kids.
That was such a sweet moment, though.
It was precious.
Yeah. And it's Mulder like trying on this new version of himself.
And it makes Scully uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Does not appreciate that type of jacket on him.
Well, I think that she gives that really, there's like, she smiles up at him, like it's really cute, and then they don't know what to do.
Yeah,
So
they don't know what
have
to
to
do.
they have to talk about Doggett and Reyes now.
Yeah.
Because,
It's like the last time we had a moment like this, we made this baby. And
right.
I'm already making a baby right now. So now what do we do?
Right.
Just my speculation.
Here we are.
My headcanon. Yeah, I feel like this is the part of the episode where I think these plots really do diverge, because Mulder and Scully are kind of doing their own thing now. And again, we more and more we're following Doggett through this story as he is trying to kind of cope with these feelings coming back up, and then also this pressure from Reyes to experience what he saw when he had to identify his son's body, and whether there was some spiritual or supernatural aspect to it. And just to jump back to the last scene, we do see this moment where he jumps back a bit to the day where they discovered his son's body, and claims to not see a similar effect.
Right.
Though
right.
we don't
Well,
see from his perspective here.
But right.
We don't know what he sees. We just know what he says, which is... And I sort of believed him when he said that he didn't see anything, but...
I totally believe that.
Yeah.
But I think that we do get, the last thing that we get in that hospital scene with Mulder and Scully, though, is her telling Mulder that he's worth the effort. And I think that that's a really important shift. Not just in this particular episode, but I think also going forward.
Yeah, we're doing bigger stuff here.
Yeah, like I think like that is really important for Mulder. Like that's an important moment, because then we follow that with the scene, right? Well, I think we get some Jeb doing something, just looking at himself in the mirror again, and then, but then we get that conversation in the hallway again with Mulder and Doggett, and we don't get that until after Scully says, "Oh wait, don't, like, you're judging him too harshly, or you're not. You need to give him a chance, or whatever."
And he sort of opens up to the possibility of talking to Doggett.
Right. They
Like
have
a
an
person.
actual conversation. Yeah. Right. Yeah. As opposed to just yelling in the hallway or whatever. So I think that it's an important like shift, like turning point for the rest of the episode, and I think the rest of the season too.
And this scene is probably my favorite of the episode.
I love it so much.
And ironically, it's a Mulder scene who probably has, I mean, next to Scully, the least to do in this episode, but he manages to deliver this monologue that cuts right down to the center of what the show is trying to say.
Yeah.
In terms of evil and in terms of fragility. And it really seems to connect to Doggett. Doggett really seems to hear it when he's not really willing to hear anything else.
Yeah. Well, and we see Reyes try. Like, Reyes has that conversation. I think they're in the office. Reyes and Doggett have that conversation. She says, why are you so unwilling to consider this? And Doggett is pretty frank about, I like that moment where he says, if this is real, then there's something else we could have done.
He says, I gotta believe I did everything.
Right.
When we were watching that, we were like, it's I want to believe, Doggett. You've got the quote
come
wrong.
on, man. Get it right. It's literally on the poster.
You know what Mulder always says, I gotta believe.
Gotta believe, yeah. But, he has that moment where he's very honest, probably because Scully was honest that she was afraid to believe, so it's okay for Doggett to be afraid to believe, and, we kind of see that moment. But then I think Mulder's their conversation in the hallway helps it make sense for Doggett.
Yeah.
Differently.
It helps to crystallize it for him. Because he's really just seeing it very much through his grief, which is understandable. And the idea that
of course.
I let my son down. I was supposed to protect him, and I didn't. Oh. And if there's something else that I could have done to keep him safe by buying into all of this stuff, then I should have done that. And for me to do it now when it's too late, it's too much.
But, and I do think that's what gets Doggett, though. Doggett is suddenly somehow on board for whatever confrontation they're about to have at Cathy Duke's house. He is on board enough to go and have this showdown. Right.
And I guess the question is, what does this mean to him at this point? And I'm not really clear on that. And again, I think this is a hallmark of this episode where there's all of these moments that I really like watching, like this watchability, like you're talking about, Sarah. But I don't know how well the threads of the episode connect up to each other to create a cohesive plot.
Mm-hmm.
But everything's very exciting.
It is very exciting. Yeah, it is. I mean, he does. I think he says something very much like, this has something to do with my son, and so he's going to go and find out no matter.
This has something to do with my son.
Right.
I gotta believe.
Right. So he's going to find out what it is, even if he thinks it's mostly nonsense.
Right.
Or whatever.
And at the very least, there is this, what's now a serial killer on the loose. So maybe we should do something.
Clearly, something needs to happen because Jeb is going to continue murdering people at phone booths. So
Ron Canada is still in New Orleans. We better figure this out for our own sake.
Right.
And through this time, we've seen glimpses of Cathy, and we find that he has returned to the house and has sort of used his niece as a way in, because she has sort of accepted her beloved uncle with open arms. And you can see Mom is kind of like,
not great.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, we already know that she opens the doors to strangers, so why not let her evil uncle in?
Exactly.
Who she already knows.
Right.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. But eventually she does apparently make a call. We don't hear what she says on her end, but it's probably something like, he's here, you gotta get here. He's here. Okay, bye. And then she gives what is possibly the worst performance of a mother trying to
Everyone in this family is not subtle.
No.
They really
Sweetie,
lack subtlety.
can you step away from your uncle for a moment? Sorry, what's happening? Oh, I just need her to step away from you and walk over to me. Everything's fine.
Totally casual. Just
make sure you step away from him.
Step around the edge of the room,
We're gonna go in the hallway where we're safe.
The FBI is on their way, so I just need you to come over here, please. No.
And there's just ultimately a lot of screaming in that scene.
Yes,
much screaming,
tough screaming of the daughter.
That was very upsetting.
You can feel the trauma being.
Oh my gosh!
Being burned into her brain.
As I was watching, I was like, that kid is really screaming though. Is she okay?
Is the actress okay? Does she know that she knows this is just a scene, right?
Oh no.
Yeah.
It's just a lot.
Yeah.
It's great.
It was effective. It was a lot of,
was.
Yeah.
especially coming from a series of quieter character scenes, and then suddenly we're in the middle of this, standoff at gunpoint with a hostage, and he he ups it to 11. He's like, I will shoot her. I will shoot. It's like, whoa.
Escalation. I mean, like, this is like, that's one of the things about this episode too, is like we had all of that very intense drama in like the opening, and then all of this very intense drama, but there was really not much as far as like action.
Yeah.
Between,
Yeah, because we don't see the second murder, on screen. We see right before and right after.
Nope.
The most action that we get is, Doggett rushing on camera and pushing Mulder against a wall.
Oh, right. The fight in the hallway. Yeah. Right. And then, so then this is when we get the final hallway conversation where Mulder is finally willing to give Doggett, actual words.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
The good conversation.
And then you think the episode's over.
Right.
But it's not. Got a bit of a final act to
Dun,
go.
dun, dun. Plot twist.
A couple final acts, really. Technically, we have two final acts.
Yes.
Two separate ones. They're very separate.
Yeah, we've got a couple things to wrap up here. So, our man is shot by Reyes on the stairwell, which is technically a hallway.
Again.
Yes, and thankfully, they are in the emergency room realm of the hospital that Scully is
Right.
is currently a patient at.
Also, did the nurse get a break, or is this all one shift?
She's working
for her?
one of those
Because,
rare
boy,
23-hour shifts. She gets 1
Right.
hour off,
I
and
hope
then
she's
is
getting
right back on.
overtime.
And so he's taken to this hospital. He's in critical condition. It's touch and go for him, and we have this scene where, and correct me if I'm jumping ahead, but Cathy is standing over his hospital bed, and he begins to go into arrest.
Right.
And this was the moment where I was like, huh? Because actress Denise Crosby runs in as the doctor to deliver, I think, 2 lines. Denise Crosby, Star Trek fans will know as Lieutenant Tasha Yar from Star Trek The Next Generation. And this is another one of those, like, Ron Canada and Denise Crosby guest starred on The X-Files to do a single scene in which they really don't add much to the plot.
They had some free time that day.
Yeah.
They were like, we're here. We'll just do it real quick. Like, I don't...
It was it really took me out of the episode for a moment, because it was just like this guest star that was basically like a glorified extra, which I was very confused about. Because I had seen her name come up in the credits in the start, in the opening scene. And so I expected her to play a more sizable role in the episode.
Yeah, that is odd.
Yeah. It's things like that make me wonder, as this script was in development, were there certain roles that were larger? Or was there a lot of changes that were made to the script?
There almost had to be things that were happening that we don't ultimately see.
Yeah. It makes me wonder if there's a draft of the script that exists without Mulder in it.
Kathy will know.
I gotta get Cathy on that.
So Jeb dies. Jeb, right, ultimately dies. And this is the catalyst for Cathy. This is for me where I really think, like, wait a second, we could have done a lot more here, because the only jumps we see from this evil are into Jeb and then into Cathy. And I think that there was maybe a version of the story where we saw the evil pass to more people.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
To make this clearer that is what is happening here.
Yeah.
Because we get it at the very beginning, and we get it at this very kind of end thing. And I think that we just, if we're going to do an episode about how evil is a thread that passes from person to person,
to have more than one or 2
we
threads.
maybe needed more people,
Right.
like in the chain, maybe.
And it doesn't help that they cheaped out in this last scene of doing any sort of effect sequence to do it. She's just like, okay, now
she
jump.
didn't get the fire person. Yeah. They didn't have enough to get the fire person twice.
Right.
So she,
We blew the budget trying to build that hallway in the forest, and it didn't work out. So.
There's like half a hallway out there somewhere.
Just leave it. Leave it for the crows to take over.
They got halfway done. They were like, pass.
Yeah. And then I'm going to call it symbolism that the weapon that this fire goes for is a fire extinguisher. I hate fire extinguishers! Knock.
It is pretty great that that's just what's there, right? But immediately, right, she's going to get revenge.
Yep.
Because Monica just happens to be standing there.
Yeah, and Reyes just gets clocked. Like,
oh, man.
Even, obviously the folks run in, and before she can do any more damage, they grab Cathy and they restrain her. And then Doggett goes down and he's just like, it's over, Reyes. And I'm like,
it's never
I think I don't know that we're at a point, she just got hit very hard on the head with a fire extinguisher. Let's not be like, everything's fine, let's head home. Oh, no, I think she might need medical treatment,
Wrap
sir.
this up. Yeah, no. Well, she's already in the hospital, so
right, perfect place to get cracked in the head.
You're fine, like, you're gonna be fine, yes. We got this covered.
Yeah, let's at least check her pupils, Doggett, before we sign off for the episode.
Oh, man. Yeah. And then, of course, immediate transition to more domesticity.
Yes. Okay, let's just jump from this anarchy.
It's literally never, Monica says it's never over, and it's literally never over because we have a whole separate thing.
We have to wrap up all these, again, like this episode, it's got so many non-connected plot pieces that we end up, it's like the Return of the King. It's just like
it is, yes, it is kind of like this with the number of like endings. Yeah. It's kind of like that. Back to having the courage to believe.
Yes.
That it's okay to have pizza with your partner.
Yes. And let the cheese congeal, and then Mulder pulls out awkwardly the gift again, and Scully opens it, and it is a series of folded leather jackets, and they all pop out like a snake in a can.
But it's like embroidered on the back, like in like grease. So she's gonna wear like his leather jacket now.
Yeah.
Like, will you wear my leather jacket?
Oh, yes, thank you. It's my size. Yeah. So it's gonna be a bit long on you. It'll drag on the floor behind you.
It will be extra cozy.
Yes. We didn't get a very good look at this antique doll.
I think we saw enough.
I suspect because it was super creepy. And I was like, oh, this is a sequel to Chinga. I didn't realize that there was the Chinga connection to this one.
Yep. It looks definitely like it's got some backstory to the doll.
That one's definitely going straight in the microwave.
Yes. I was not expecting that the first time I saw this episode, for it to be an antique doll. I don't know, was there a deleted scene where she talks about dolls, how dolls were, or like, I really want to give my child a doll? You had to do a lot of mental gymnastics to make this connect.
Yeah, it is.
Also, was it Mulder's doll or was it Samantha's doll?
It's Samantha's doll. I thought he
said. But he really, but he didn't say that, did he?
Did he?
I don't think he did.
I don't. Maybe I imagined that.
Oh my God. I feel like. Well, I hope that he did. My notes is what I'll say, because that plays a lot better than.
Nope, I don't know, but maybe I can find out though.
Well, didn't you write every line down?
I know, I said that, and that is the one thing that I did not write down. Of course,
I actually do have the transcript right here.
You do?
Oh well, thank goodness.
Yeah.
Just Control F Samantha or sister.
I don't think it does say Samantha.
Okay, so that's just in my mind then. That's that. Sorry. This is me bringing this into
Well, good for you. You were able to create such cohesive headcanon to make this scene work better for you. Because I feel like if he says, I know it's easy for us to rewrite scenes 20 years later, but
it really is.
But to just say, this was Samantha's, and I couldn't think of anyone else that I would want to have it to have this more than little whoever's in there. Maybe say it a little more eloquently than that, or not, because these people are very awkward with each other.
No, he doesn't say. Okay, so I'm looking at the transcript, and honestly, he doesn't really say anything.
He doesn't
say anything.
He jokes about it being the wrong doll, if I recall correctly. Which seemed like an ad lib to me. Like
What does he say? Okay, but what does he say in the beginning? Doesn't he say something like in the first scene?
Well, I think that he hides the present. He awkwardly points to the present.
He says, I was going through some stuff after my mother died, and it's an old family keepsake. I wanted you to have it. So you're right. He doesn't say who the doll belonged to.
Because it keeps it very ambiguous at that point. But just throw something in there. Say this was Samantha's doll.
Right.
And then get way too into, like, she was holding it when she was abducted. It fell to the ground, and I clutched it in my arms.
We would have another flashback.
I know, right? But for some reason, Doggett has the flashback to the abduction.
Doggett is remembering, yeah. Well, he's still in the hospital with Monica Reyes.
Yes,
so
he's like, I read that file on Mulder.
Right, he's in Monica's hospital room having a different flashback.
I want to stay here longer, but I got to go out into the hallway and have a flashback here. I'll be back in a few minutes.
I'll be BRB. Hallway time.
Exactly.
Okay, wow.
Well, I thought that the episode ended in very great horror, like Norman Bates tradition, by doing the Norman Bates camera stare at Cathy, who is strapped to the bed.
Comatose, maybe? Yeah.
Forever insane.
Right.
And all I could think of was, what's gonna happen with her daughter, who's also super traumatized. But
right.
Yeah.
Well, in theory, right, as soon as Mia comes to visit her mother, if she does, the evil could pass right to her.
But I think that the host has to die. I think that the host has to die.
Okay, could be.
Because otherwise it would have gone to Monica when she shot him, right? If he didn't have to die first.
Right.
Well, only if Reyes is vulnerable to it, though. Only if Reyes has experienced some sort of trauma that made her vulnerable. Right?
Ooh, there's the version of the episode where one of our agents is infected and then has to sort of fight
the evil.
Yeah.
But that's a whole different...
Or it could have gone to Doggett because he has experienced trauma.
Yeah.
Right? I don't
Absolutely.
know.
And then he starts seeing these visions. Again, we're just writing a different episode now.
We are.
Yeah.
This is different.
Isn't that funny how that always happens with us, JJ?
Not helpful.
Just rewrite the episode.
Yeah, I mean, like, in terms of like, final thoughts, yeah, I think there's a lot of great stuff in this episode. I wish that I wasn't so interested in the things that I thought could have been done better, so maybe that's on me. But I think that the episode moves the show further along by, like, continuing to introduce Reyes in a more substantial way, and then building upon the Mulder-Scully relationship as it, enters this new phase. But, it's a shame because, like, we see their relationship evolving, but knowing that in just a handful of episodes, Mulder will, for all intents and purposes, be gone until the finale of the show.
I know.
It's tough. It's tough to build a show like this when it's going through so many transitions and you don't even know what characters you're going to have to play with in the next season. Yeah. So, I don't envy the writers.
No, I totally agree. I love watching. I really enjoy this episode a lot, obviously. But I think it's totally fair to say that there's so many things happening that none of them happen to their fullest extent, or none of them happen to their fullest, like, capability. And yeah, I think I do agree. This is sort of like a pivot point for Mulder and Scully at this kind of place in season 8. We're clearly having some sort of pivot where we're going to move them into their new place together. And I, obviously love seeing Monica Reyes come in and do some stuff, do some crazy stuff.
Yeah. And it's an interesting way. Like, Reyes is such an interesting character to me. The way that she's introduced as, like, a guest star again and again in this season, where they fully knew that they wanted to bring her in as a regular, but they are still sort of, giving us drops of who she is. And it's very clear that the writers
who is this? Yeah.
are still trying to figure out, like, okay, who is this person? And, I feel like this episode does a good job of laying out a lot of what Reyes would be, but still not quite hitting on some of the other things that we would learn about her in the coming season. And, unfortunately, like, watching this episode, especially because it's so Reyes heavy, it's hard to not think about the revival seasons. And this is what I'm going to say, is that Annabeth Gish plays a character in that named Monica Reyes, whom I do not recognize in any way as being this character, if that makes sense. There's just
it is
no
really
connect
hard.
there.
Yeah,
It's
it
just
is
tough.
really hard to think about. Like, you were saying, like, it's hard to watch this Mulder and Scully stuff happen, knowing what we know is coming for them. Like, it's really hard to watch this Monica Reyes stuff happen, knowing what we know is coming eventually for her. It's very strange. It's very strange.
There are a lot of ups and downs of the revivals, and I think that a lot of those episodes are super worthy, and I'm really glad that they exist and that we can watch them. But the Reyes stuff, for me, it will always be a head scratcher. I do not get it. I do not get it.
Yes.
So I'm on record.
Now everyone will
Fair
know.
enough. Yes. All right, let's hop over to the mailbag and see what some of our listeners in the basement had to say. Okay. Jessica had to say, I like the metaphor of evil as possessing fire triggered by trauma, whether that fire invades from without or comes from within. Tying the story to Doggett is not necessary, but interesting and adds layers to his character. Reyes still seems incongruously upbeat. Could do without the Mulder Scully mad about you stuff, but I guess they've earned it. So, yeah, I think we that sort of sums up a little bit of what we talked about. And then this is the comment from Adam that you're talking about, Cortlan, from the beginning. He says, I like it. The pizza scene is awkward, but it's a tiny part of the episode, and I don't understand being hung up about it. The episode is a hint of what an ensemble show might have looked like. This is one of the best uses and characterizations of Reyes, and the only time we see her and Mulder interact significantly. Robert Patrick gives a great performance as his backstory is explored, something we only got hints about in Invocation, and this is not happening. I also like when you can interpret events in more than one way. Some evil presence may have been literally jumping bodies, or traumatic events may trigger people into evil actions they'd otherwise not take. Not a classic episode by any means, but perhaps underrated. So yeah, Cortlan.
That is not the comment that I was thinking, but I do
Sorry.
agree. No, that's totally fine. That's not the comment that I was thinking about, but I do agree that this gives us an inkling of what a fuller ensemble might have looked like. Especially thinking about, like, if Mulder had not left in season 9, I think we would have seen more episodes that looked similar to this one, where he is acting as some kind of consultant, on some sort of consultant basis for Doggett and Reyes, or in some sort of team that way. But, obviously that's not what we get, so.
Yeah, it's interesting to postulate about what the show could have looked like if this was the format for the next season. And
Sure.
I think it probably would have bumped into a lot of the same issues that this episode has, where it's just a lot of things to juggle. But I'm sure they would have fine-tuned that formula and figured out a way to pair people up and not have one of their characters in a hospital bed for the episode.
Right. Or to, I think that there was a different way to, like, rotate people. And we see a little bit of that in season 9, like with Scully at Quantico, like, she kind of comes in and out of things like that. And I think they would have hopefully found some kind of balance for that.
Well, I think Adam makes another...
If he had stuck around.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Adam makes another good point about the idea of evil and whether we should be seeing this as a metaphor or something literally happening. And I think that the episode, in that last scene, unfortunately, I think it kind of undermines that concept when it does that weird kind of jump for Katha's character, which makes it seem like there is like something physical happening. Because the earlier scene, like I said in the teaser, I thought it was really well done, and it is quite ambiguous. Like, are we actually seeing something that he's experiencing literally, or is this just some sort of part of his mental breakdown that he's experiencing after being fired? And I think the episode maybe would have benefited if it would have leaned more into the figurative sort of reading of it and left things ambiguous for the audience a little bit more. Okay.
Heather says, bad episode, highly skippable. The only part I like is when angry Mulder somewhat comes to Doggett's defense when Reyes refuses to read the room. This might have been a far better episode in an earlier season. It doesn't play as much about passing evil among people, but rather whininess. Whatever happened to Doggett's son was on a whole other level. So I think we kind of touched on that it might have been a little bit of a different episode in an earlier season.
Yeah, if it would have happened at a different time in the show. I mean, it would have just been about the plot of the case, as opposed to all the other periphery stuff. Not that that stuff isn't important to the episode as it stands. And I think they're referring to the potato chip scene. When I
think she must be right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, and I like that scene too. I think mostly because it shows the growth in Mulder, where he's able to read the room, something that he is famously unable to do in the past.
Great.
But yeah, I think that all those criticisms are super founded, and it is interesting with a show like the X-Files, which takes a bit of a sharp left turn in the last couple of seasons, to think about what some of these plots might have looked like if they had been adopted in the earlier formula of the show.
For sure.
So this is the one you were talking about from Andrew Cortlan.
Yes.
The weakest of the final run of episodes in season 8 because it tries to do too much and ends up not giving any of its storylines enough time to develop. Introducing Rhea's interest in the occult and its link to the disappearance of Doggett's son has a lot of potential. Indeed, the opening scenes with Reyes are enjoyable and evocative. However, the episode is then derailed by the Mad About You style scenes between Mulder and Scully, putting the latter in the hospital to create some stakes that don't fit with the rest of the episode. Also, Mulder feels forced into the narrative. These aspects detract from what had the potential to give Doggett some powerful backstory. They also sideline the substandard Jeb Duke storyline and the link between it and Doggett's son's disappearance are never made entirely clear. A competent episode that had more potential. 6 out of 10. So, yeah, I think that sums it up pretty well.
I think so. I think it's really fair. I think that all of that, if I were, yes, like I said at the very beginning, thinking of this episode purely on a critical level, I think all of that is very accurate. It does not, for me, take away how much I enjoy the episode, and in particular, the part that it plays in this back half of season 8, because I think it's the Mad About You style scenes are kind of pivotal for that part of our story. But I agree that it is disparate. It reminds me of Home Again, as we discovered throughout the course of our chat.
Yes, and I'll take that to the next level, and this is where I sort of backpedal a little bit on what I was saying before. But they said in that comment that the Duke's plot was. What was the phrasing that they used?
Substandard.
The substandard.
Jeb Duke something.
And that might be true. And I will say this, they talk about how good the opening scenes are, but those are opening scenes in that plot. And for me, as the episode goes on, the best scenes of the episodes are the quote-unquote Mad About You scenes. Mm-hmm. The scenes that focus on Mulder, the scenes that focus on this relationship, and they are not connected to that plot at all. So... I don't know, if you excise that stuff and just go with this story, I don't know if you have a better episode. I think that you have a more cohesive story, but I don't think that you have, a memorable X-File. I don't think you have one for the books. I think you've got a really, really average at best monster of the week, unless they come up with something else to replace those scenes that takes it in a really creative direction. So in a way, I think maybe some of these Mulder and Scully scenes are what give this episode... really that watchability,
well, I think definitely that's what lends it the watchability for sure, is the Mulder and Scully are those scenes that we see. I do think that the Jeb Duke storyline could have been great, especially with the connection to Doggett's son.
But you need more ingredients.
I mean, it would need to be punched up.
Yeah.
I mean, it would need more than we got, for sure. It couldn't just be what we got. We would have to assume that there's more that would have been included and just couldn't make it for time.
More Ron Canada, more Denise Crosby.
Sure. Exactly.
I could, the darkness gets passed on to the doctor in the hospital first.
I think there would have
the doctor
had to be
starts killing patients.
A much clearer. Yes. There would have had to be a much clearer, like, thread of people that we, were following.
Absolutely.
These acts. Like, there would have had to have been more,
Yeah.
for sure, for it to be a standalone, just like Monster of the Week,
Right.
So, yeah.
It mostly takes place in New Orleans.
Whatever, yeah.
Ron Canada is throughout the episode.
We get to see more about Bob Harvey, which is the explicit connection to John Doggett's son, is this one man who happened to be there in New York, and then also is the person that passed the evil to Jeb. Like,
maybe
so
a
all
flashback.
Of that, it just happens.
Yeah.
Well, we need
maybe another flashback.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
With his interrogation with Doggett and Reyes.
Exactly. Yeah, we needed more of that, maybe. Yeah.
I want to see the scene where Ron Canada brings in Marilyn Manson for questioning. And it's just like, I think
Goes
this is
to
connected
Kmart
to your
to
rock
confirm.
music, sir. Or ma'am. I'm not sure. I haven't done my research.
Goes to Kmart to confirm that, yes, this is available.
So you're saying that
In
my
the
kids
CD
can buy this at Kmart? I don't think so.
It was even on sale for $14.99. I don't know how much CDs cost at that time.
Blue light special.
That's it. You kids are
Remember?
not allowed
my
to
gosh.
shop for music at Kmart anymore. You do all your music shopping at Ames or Hills department store.
Go to Sam Goodies.
You gotta go to Hastings to get your CDs.
Oh
Well,
my
that's off the
goodness.
rails
Well,
enough, right? To
I
Yep.
think we're good. I think we pretty
we
much
did
covered it all.
We got it. Great job, everybody.
Don't forget to order your leather jacket.
Mrs. Mulder's Leather Emporium. One size fits one.
Cortlan, where can we find you online?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram if you just search for my name, Cortlan, Cortlan. I'm the only one with the X-Files in my bio, so.
Perfect. And JJ, what have you got going on?
Oh,
Where can we find
this
you?
and that. The thing that I will promote here is my Patreon, which is at patreon.com/JJ Lendl, Lendl. That's the word end with an L on either side. If you are an X-Files fan, which I assume you are if you're listening to this podcast, I've got lots of really cool benefits related to the X-Files in my Patreon, including digital content, downloads. Some tiers include physical benefits, including postcards. There's a zine I do called Episode, which often includes X-Files stuff. And I also want to talk about how I have launched a Patreon shop, which is exclusively accessible to patrons of any tier. So if you want to sign up for my Patreon just for $1 a month to try it out, you'll have access to that shop, and you'll see what kind of cool goodies are available for order there, including tons of exclusive X-Files stuff.
This is why JJ is a much more successful artist than me, because I did not promote my Patreon just now.
I mean,
You should.
Do it.
She'll cut it in back
do
there.
it now.
And
No, I'm just kidding. I do have a
JJ's
Patreon,
art is
but
garbage, but he's really great at promotion. That's all that
There
I
is
heard.
a lot less X-Files content on my Patreon
There you
than
go.
on JJ's.
That's okay.
So
She has her hand by her mouth
Relevant.
like now, like it's a secret, by the way.
It is a secret. No, it's not. So it's just, I was like, yeah, look at JJ being very good at promoting himself.
For some reason, no one else will do it, so
I mean, right? No, I get it. Although I will say I am one of JJ's patrons, and you should check out his shop because it's awesome.
And I thank you for your patronage. That's very kind. Yeah, I appreciate all my patrons. I really do try and put stuff together every week that will be interesting. And, it covers other fandoms, too. I have plenty of Star Trek stuff, Star Wars. I do a lot of licensed art, so I'll often share some behind-the-scenes posts so you can see older drafts of stuff. You can see how work develops. And then some exclusive sketches from my sketchbook, too. So I will stop promoting it right there.
Well, I can safely say that as a patron of both of your patronages, Patreons?
Take that again.
Patreons. I am a patron of your Patreons.
There you go.
And I enjoy both of them very much.
Thank you.
So, y'all need to get on that and go support these amazing artists because they are both wonderful. And, so do that. And you can find the XCast online. We are on Facebook at the XCast Basement. And we're on Twitter at @the_X_cast and on Instagram at @the_X_cast_pod. And you can find me. I'm Sarah L. Blair on Twitter. And you can find me on Instagram at author.sarah.blair. And I am a writer, so I have books out. I have a Tides of Darkness series that fans of the X-Files will love. I don't know if I'm going to put like a guaranteed stamp on that, but so far every X-Files fan that I know who has happened to read my books has told me that they have enjoyed it. So yeah, go check those out. Tides of Darkness series, and it's on Amazon, so easy to find. But I think that about does it for this episode. Thank you both for being here and joining us for this season 8 episode. And until next time, as always, trust no one.
Hello, and this is Chucky Vision on the We Made This Network, the podcast for all things Chucky. I'm Dev Elson.
And I'm Mark Adams. We're two queer podcasters who love bloody horror,
Camp comedy, gay romance,
and referencing icons like Freddy, Jason, and Britney.
The Chucky films and new TV show deliver all of that, and there is still so much more to cover.
So if you want to play, find Chucky Vision on Twitter at Chucky Vision and on all good podcast providers.
And yes, the title is a Chuckle Vision pun.
Because why not?
The X-Cast, an X-Files podcast, was created by Tony Black and is produced and hosted by Carl Sweeney, Sarah Blair, and Kurt North.
You can find the podcast on Twitter at the X_cast, on Facebook by typing in the X-Cast, and in our group, X-Files Basement, the X-Cast podcast fan group, and on Instagram at the X-Cast pod.
Don't forget, you can support the show by becoming a member on Patreon. Our patrons get early access to episodes, behind-the-scenes chats with our hosts and a thriving community of X-Files, and other premium interviews and specials. To find out more and subscribe, you can go to patreon.com/thexcast. That's patreon.com/thexcast.
We are also part of the We Made This podcast network, full of popular culture shows, including our Millennium series, The Time Is Now. You can find all of our shows at our website, wemadethispod.com, or via Twitter at wemadethispod.
Thanks for listening, and keep watching the skies.